So this question is valid number. So given the string s, you want to define whether or not the string s is valid. So there are a few constraints. An integer can follow by optional exponents and a decimal. And same thing, integer decimal followed by minus or plus digit, and digit can follow by a dot and followed by a digit. A dot can be followed by a digit, and so on. Alright, let's go through the example pretty quickly. For invalid, ABC, 1A, 1E, E3, all these guys are not valid. It's pretty understandable. And this one, 20089, negative 0.1, this is decimal, this is integer, right? And this is a decimal with a sign, and this is decimal. Just imagine this point 0.0, and then this will be a decimal 0. Negative 0.9, and then so on. So there are some constraints. So for example, if you have seen E, then you don't want the E again, right? So for example, E is not allowed. Or E dot is not allowed, right? So what you should do is what? You should segregate into two parts. Its first part is before E, second part is after E. And what you should do is you want to make sure the first part before E can be integer or decimal. So let's say integer or decimal. And then the second part E, I believe is going to be you can go with the plus minus sign, right? You can go with plus minus sign over here first, and what you can do is you want to do the integer, right? So this is a decimal, so that's why it's not allowed. This is integer, that's why it's allowed. So yeah, so there are a few constraints, and anything beside letter E is for character, then is false. Yes, anything beside these two characters is false. So you have A, you have B, something like this, you return false right away. And yeah, if you have dot, if you're trying to put a dot over here, it's definitely false. If you put a dot over here, that's true. So I'm going to write a solution right away while I'm explaining. So I'm going to reformat the string, because this can be contain English letter, right? So this can be uppercase E or lowercase e, but I just want to convert it to lowercase. And then I also trim the space, and I also want to create create my boolean. So I want to say dot sing, and so this will return false, and then E sing, that will return false by default, and also number before E equal false, number after E will return false, and I will traverse. So since I'm going to use some index to determine whether or not is followed by a dot or followed by a sign, something like this, I'm going to just use it as a and then I create a chart for indicate a current index. So if C is currently C is greater or equal than 0, and C is less than or equal than 9. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to make sure does have you seen E seen? So have you seen E seen for when you see a number? So what does that mean? You want to set these two values, right? So if E has been seen, then you want to set this to true. Otherwise, like this is the default for E seen. So it would be default. So this will be true. So if I do it reversely. So if E has not been seen, then before E is true. If E has been seen, then number after E is true. So it's actually pretty tricky. So if you look, this is pretty redundant, then you can do this. If E seen, then after E equal to true, else before E equal to true. Okay, so let me remove this. Alright, so now next one is if I see a dot. So if the dot has been seen, right? You cannot say dot dot, right? So if a dot has been seen, you want to return false. Okay, if a dot has not been seen, then I can return true right here. Okay, and what else? Can you put a dot after E? No, right? So if dot seen or E seen, then you return false right away. Okay, else if C equal to plus or C equal to minus. So that being said, you want to verify this, right? So you can also put the sign later in the index 0, but you want to do this if I is greater than 0 and the index minus 1 does not equal to E, lowercase e, if the index is greater than 0 and the previous index is not E, then you are trying to put the plus minus sign in an incorrect spot, then you can return false right here. Everything else will be true. So if you do this minus minus, so the first minus is valid. The second minus, you will do a sanity check. If I is greater than 0, okay, if my previous character does not equal to E, I'm going to return false because the previous character can be what? Can be E, right? This is also E. Yeah, this is false. This is yeah. I mean, I can only using these two as an example. And what I can also check is if the current character is E, then the sanity check for this is if I already have E and then I have another E coming up, I will return false. Otherwise, I will set E to be true. E seems to be true. So I have dot, I have sign, I have E, I have character for integer. Then everything else, that will return false. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Alright, now let's look at the return type. So if E has been seen, then I want to make sure the number before E and number after E are valid. So you cannot put like this. This is not valid. Exponent needs to follow by the integer, right? So I will do this number before E. Oh, number before E is this one, and number after E. Else, if E doesn't show up in the stream, it's just a pretty straightforward number before E. So yeah, that's it. So this is pretty much the solution. It's pure logic, and then if you look at some solution in here, like it's some of them trying to write out like the whole math probably for this, but this will be pretty straightforward and understandable. So you want to make sure if you see a number, then you want to check before E and after E, right? And if you see a dot, you want to check does the dot has been happened beforehand and E happened beforehand. If not, then you say true. If so, then return false. And so as plus minus sign, have you seen E and everything else character will return false. So that will be it. For the time, this will be time, all of them for the time, and then constant for the space. So this is like reusing their space, so it's not allocated a new space. So time and space are trivial. So that's it. I see you.